All right.
And we are live. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to a very special edition of Off the Record on the People's Podcast this afternoon. We have a magnificent guest with us today, one who is going to give us some amazing information as well as inspiration, and that is none other than our brother, the scientist himself, student minister Roger A. Muhammad out of Canada. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam, sir.
Yes, sir. This means a lot to myself, my family, and the viewing audience of the People's Podcast. You are, in fact, back by popular demand. Part one did so well, and there were so many people who had questions dealing with such a important and vital topic as is it possible that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is physically alive? So we just wanted to thank you again. Thank you for part one, and thank everyone who is ready for part two. Thank you for all of the positive feedback and questions. One of the questions that we got, Brother Minister, is he said he doesn't believe that the most, well, he's battling his belief in the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad being physically alive, but he still wants to help the nation, Black people, and of course humanity. He wanted to know, can he still assist, although his faith and belief isn't on where, to the point where he believes the messenger is still alive.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Praise be to Allah. Again, and before continuing, just so the audience knows, your brother just moved, so I'm in a new place. So I have slight connection issues. So I'm praying to Allah, calling on Master Father Muhammad to help us out with this one. But yes, so that being said, as believers, of course, we're not in a position to boldly say, okay, who can and cannot help in this divine and sacred cause. What I think we can do, taking an objective approach, is to look at the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, when he started to rebuild the nation, did not believe that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was still physically alive. He, if you remember, I mean, whenever Brother Minister Jabril Muhammad would come to him with that book and that brown paper bag, and and he would ask him, "Did you read the book?" And he said, yeah, brother, I'll get to it." And questioning him as to whether he believes or not. And his answer was simply that, "Look, brother, he's not here, but we're here, so let's do the work." So that was the first stage in his development. And when he stood back up, I don't think anybody would argue that when he stood back up, not believing yet that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is physically alive, no one would argue that he was a hypocrite, and no one would argue that he was a hypocrite. That's one. Number two, no one would argue that he was a believer. If we ask, okay, what's a believer? I think everyone would agree. And that he was doing the work in spite of not believing, that he was rebuilding the nation, was he not? So based on those three criteria, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan being our template, being our benchmark, our standard by which we measure our criteria, if you will, I think that we can confidently say that those of us who may not necessarily be comfortable or have the assurance or even believe that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is still physically alive, still should, strive to do the work. And those of us who are working with those brothers and sisters should not be so harsh. We should be like Brother Minister Jabril, who was patient with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, gentle, cajoling him, gently taking him stage after stage to the realization of the truth until the scales came off and the operation was a success. And yes, so ultimately, this truth will become inevitable, whether we, accept it or not, at various degrees. So I would personally not feel comfortable at all saying to a sincere brother who says he believes in the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, wants to help the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as the Messiah in our midst, to tell that brother, no, you cannot, because of that point. That being said, I would encourage the brother to really study this question. Because again, what we discussed the last time in part one was that, whenever we state a claim, so let's say that if your claim is that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is not alive, and that's your position, then that position and that claim has logical consequences and logical extensions, necessary conclusions. And the necessary conclusion, if you follow it all the way through, and that's what I would encourage my brother to do, follow your logic all the way through. Go back in the scriptures, go back to what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, and then compare that with this position that you have currently, and see if you can still remain logically consistent. Because really, at the end of the day, and it's not a knock, it's just a statement of analytics, to say that it's logically inconsistent to say we believe in the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and simultaneously not believe he's alive and escape a death plot because he himself said that he would. And so his words cannot be true while at the same time him being dead. Like biological extension, those are mutually exclusive statements. They're not mutually inclusive. But it doesn't mean that because, like we all commit logical fallacies in different ways, so it's not a judgment. It's just to say, really think about it and study, challenge yourself. I came to the teachings really from the perspective of someone who was against the teachings originally. I came in looking for arguments to say that this is not real Islam, that this is not. And so ultimately, the more you study, the more you come to the realization that, hey, you know what, that no longer makes sense. So I would say to the brother, please, brother, don't stay there, and keep an open mind. And we're going to share some articles and some references that we encourage you to read and to study meticulously, and go back and, it's not a cheap plug, but go back and listen to part one about logical fallacies, logical consistency, why he necessarily is alive. So that's how I answer that. And I also wanted to touch on 2 points. Now, if I may, from comments that I read from the last conversation we had. So 2 things. So one, as believers especially, I think it's very important. Mother Tynetta constantly said that we have to, and I'm paraphrasing, elevate our game, in the way we reason, and the way we think, and the way we, we have to be critically, we have to be critical thinkers, and we have to rise above emotions into the thinking of God. Why am I saying this? Is that we may sometimes have a tendency to jump the gun. Case in point, when it was said last time that it is necessary, that the answer to the question, is it possible that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is still physically alive? The answer is not that it is possible. The answer is that he necessarily is alive. He is alive by necessity. I think that some people interpreted it as somehow us rewording the title of the book so that it should not be called that. So, but then, and some, beautiful believers, and, we had some very civil exchanges, and I pointed them back to the recordings to go back and listen. That what we're not saying to change the title. We're saying that the answer to the question in that title is he is necessarily alive. But that is it's indicative to me of how sometimes, and especially in the era of social media, we can jump to conclusions instead of taking a step back. As the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, think 7 times before you speak. Because sometimes you might look at an information and there's some emotional charge, or you're in some state and you want to respond, but instead you need to take a step back, go back and really revisit. Like in Closing the Gap, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the minister, talks about this example of a letter that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had received. And initially he had a very negative view of that letter. And then he let it sit. And then the next morning he read it again, and he read a completely different letter. So that, I think, is important, because as we're going to be tackling this topic with different people of different walks of life, we have to keep a very level head, and we have to be really thorough in whatever claims and statements that we put forward. So I just wanted to kind of make that house cleaning note to because I figured, well, if some brothers have written that this is what they understood, maybe others have. So we wanted to make it clear that we by no means and will we ever say that we should change the title of the book of Minister Jabril Muhammad, which is a title that was actually given by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So the title is sacred, and that question is sacred, and we would never change it. All we need to be worried about is the right answer. And the second thing is, as some pointed out, even though I did make the clarification within the talk that we had, but some people, made the comment that, and this is not directly pertaining to him being physically alive. I think it's more for people who actually believe that, which is great. But just to make that specification, because it is important. Some say, well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was already God before going to Master Fard Muhammad. Right, so because what we said the last time was, well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that when he comes back, if he did not tell us that he is not God, we would be found worshiping at his feet. And so, some may point out, well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that he was a God already. So isn't that like a contradiction? Well, again, let's take an analytical approach to this. We know that there are degrees to anything, right? You could be an engineer, but you could be a junior engineer, you could be a senior, you could be a principal, you could be a director, and so absolutely the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he did say that he was of course a God, and he teaches that the black man is God. So of course, he definitely was on a level, like he said himself, when asked, if he was perfect, he said, I'm not perfect, but I'm perfect enough for you, and I'm God enough for you, right? So he to say that he was God, yes, absolutely. However, he had not ascended to the power of Christ that would come from him going back, because that is in his statement that he himself said that he would need to undergo that transition of going back to his teacher to receive the second level, if you will, that highest degree of godhood. And that's what we were referring to. We're not negating that the Hon Elijah Muhammad really was a God among us. That is no question the truth. But we have to look at his own words where he said that he would ascend, where, as he said it himself, I need to go and study to get the new teaching. And then once he does that, if he didn't tell us that he is not God, we will be. So really, we're just quoting his words and putting them into perspective. That what we're saying is that that degree of God he had not reached yet in terms of the full power to exercise that Christhood. And so that for that to happen, it was necessary for him to go back to his father. Otherwise, he would not have said that about himself. So, and that is to answer those who would say, well, you know, he was already a God. So it kind of, if you will, negate that statement. So in truth, yes. However, in degrees, and the degree that he himself referred to was that highest degree that he himself said he would need to go up to his father, to his teacher, Master Father Muhammad, to obtain. So I wanted to just clear up those 2 points. And if anybody in the chat, you know, if you have you know, further questions or would like for us to elaborate on that, you know, we would be glad to oblige. But yeah, so I figured that, you know, those came through my mind, so you know, figured I just addressed them.
Perfect. All praise due to Allah, and people are showing you love all around the world. Thank you, sister. Walaikum salam, sister Naima. Walaikum salam. Peace, family, sister Deborah, and peace, sister Aisha. Thank you, everyone who's watching. Shout out to our YouTube family as well. I wanted to, if we could recall the story about the prostitutes, and the significance of them saying that you got a gentle way and things of that nature. Could you go into that?
Yes. So, okay. So we have to start with, you know, asking, well, what are the counter arguments that people have? You know, so the counter arguments that people have when we say, well, I don't believe the Hon Elijah Muhammad is physically alive, the argument often is, well, he was sick. We has a medical history of all sorts of conditions. And so his death was a natural one. Now, again, there's something that I want to read after from Mother Tainetta, you know, if we have a moment, but because it goes into that point about the prostitutes. If it is true that there was no death blood, he just died of natural death. Well, first of all, if that's true, then my question is, well, okay, so when the Hon Elijah Muhammad said that he would escape a death blood, then how do you answer that? Like how would that happen?
Mm-hmm.
By what means then? Because if you can't find any, then it means that what he said was not true. If it was not true, it was a lie. If it was a lie, then it invalidates everything else, because he said that if you find one word that is false, then essentially, you know, so that's the thing. But now what we're presenting, and what from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, is that what we have are external witnesses who are not members of the nation, who are actually in a lifestyle that is contrary to our teaching. So if anything, they have no reason to try to, you know, make a case for a death plot. And at the time, there was not even a debate over this. I mean, let's think about it. There was no debate around this. People just accepted him as being dead. But now here we have these women prostitutes who are in a setting where they are with doctors who are now saying from their witness account, who again have no pun intended, no skin in the game, no pun intended. They just none, okay? And they're saying that they heard their conversation where they talked about, and they weren't even sure at the beginning who it was. They couldn't even place that it was Elijah Muhammad. If you go back and you study 1981, they were trying to actually locate which black leader had died recently, because they heard the name, but they weren't sure. And then when it was said Elijah Muhammad, then it was a yes. Then it became clear that, okay, yes, that's the one. But now they're saying they have a witness account where they have doctors who said, we took care of that problem, meaning Elijah Muhammad, non-violently. Now, logically, I'm trying to reason. Like, let's say I'm talking to, let's say, brother or sister who doesn't believe. Like, I'm trying to say, okay, look, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that there would be a death plot. These prostitutes are saying that the doctors have said that they took care of the problem, who is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And by the way, if you remember, that goes back to the cartoon with Charles de Gaulle, who said, if it were not for that man, we would have a prosperous future, right? Because he is a problem. He is, and he was and is a problem. Now they're saying we took care of that non-violently. So for a medical doctor, let's think critically. For a medical doctor to make that statement, and he made that statement in an environment, clearly they made that statement in an environment where they felt it was safe, where there was no way for them to anticipate that these prostitutes would be connected to someone who would be connected to someone in the nation, and that word would go back to them. So they felt in a, as they call it now in woke terms, safe space. Another kind of safe space. And so that testimony, I mean, if you were to take that in terms of an argument to court, in any other type of case, that's an eyewitness. That's an external witness. That's like if you have an accident on the street and there's the people in the family of the victim who are saying or giving an account of what happened, that this and this and that happened. That has some weight. But then when an external witness who is not connected to the family, who is not a friend of the family, who doesn't know anything about the family, says they see the same thing, that makes for a very compelling case in court in terms of credibility. Where in any other setting, being a prostitute, with all due respect, would not be a position of credibility. But in this very position, in this context, it's actually the opposite. So it's actually something that when you take that and you equate it with other terms, because again, the key element is to not take statements in isolation. And that's the mistake that sometimes we make, is that we take a statement and we isolate it, and like the example of saying, well, well, he said that he would go back after, that he would be gone for 3 years, and then 3 years later, the Minister Louis Farrakhan shows up. Like, that makes sense in an isolated, sort of logic, but it no longer makes sense in light of other variables. And here in this case, if the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that there was a death plot, and now medical doctors, and this is the best case scenario, given that we already read from the FBI memos that, they looked at the old age, and they weren't going to outright take him out like that. They knew it would cause like an outrage because of his age. But now, so they had to take care, I'm again quoting the words of the doctor, take care of that problem nonviolently. And so now that also coincides, because again, let's go back, if we are believers to the Quran that says, and they plan, and Allah plan, and Allah is the best of planners. So while that plan of non-violently taking care of the Hon Elijah Muhammad was taking place, there was another master plan to, if you will, save the Honorable Elijah Muhammad from that situation. And that again is a challenge to those who would say that they don't believe, is to say, well, is Master Farad Muhammad not able to save his student? Is he not? Like, if we say that, you know, because a lot of people who say that they don't believe, they, if you ask them, I'm talking mostly about believers who are still on the fringe. And I think that's who we're talking to at this point, because there will be another time when we can talk to people who are not necessarily of our faith. And then we have another different set of arguments that we can present. But for those of us who believe, but who say, well, I believe, but I don't believe that he's still physically alive. You know, again, if you ask them, well, do you believe in the mother plant? Do you believe in baby plants? Yes, yes, I do. Some will say, I've seen them. I've seen them with my own eyes. Okay. Well, what kind of technology is that? Well, it's millions of years ahead of the white man's technology. Okay, okay. So you mean to tell me that a technology of that power, with that technology at his disposal, not to mention the spiritual technology that allowed Master Farad Muhammad to go back beyond the veil of triple darkness to the point of origination of the mind of the originator, which made him one with the originator. Now, not to mention that power, but to make the claim that, yes, that the master has that power to build this technology, has that spiritual power to tune into our minds, to answer prayers as one who is one with the originator. But he doesn't have the power to fulfill a scripture that clearly states on several occasions that this Messiah at the end would be taken up. It is said clearly in the Quran, in the Bible, that this would occur. So how do you make an adequation of that? It's almost like if you add all of these variables together, all of a sudden it makes no sense. It's like, how can I believe this and at the same time not believe that, when the two are, if you will, codependent? So, you know, and the reason why I'm saying this is because, again, the statement of the prostitutes is a powerful external statement, but you can't look at it in isolation. You have to look at it in light of other variables again. But I would say that anybody who argues against him being physically alive said, well, you know, we need to go speak to these. I don't know if they're still alive, but you know, to these women in a righteous context, of course.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Yes, sir. You teaching. Okay. And thank you everyone who's showing love to our brother Student Minister Roger A. Brother say absolutely. And Sister Minister Aisha out of Phoenix wants to know, can you speak on the cloned replacement ?
Yes. That's actually one of the points that we didn't touch on and that I was hoping to kind of discuss a little bit. Because we didn't touch on that at all. And thank you, sister, because that is actually something that I was hoping to tackle on part 2, the cloning question. So the other major question in tackling this whole debate is to say, well, who was in that casket? Who was actually in that casket? Like, whose body was it? Because we have to go back to what the Honorable Minister Farrakhan said, which is, he said, well, we know the dentist, and we have statements from the dentist. Let's dig up the remains and look at the dental records and compare the dental records And if there is a match, what did the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan say he would do? He said he would actually give up altogether. He would just, right? So, and to this day, no one has accepted his challenge, by the way. But now, this needs to be considered in light of other witness accounts, namely that of his children. And while children, of course, have an emotional stake of looking at their father, thinking that perhaps he's dead, there's, of course, an emotional stake there. So that we recognize. However, that emotional stake does not, in and of itself, invalidate their ability to make a viable assessment of, let's say, the body in terms of certain details that they're familiar with, in terms of a man that they've interacted with as their own physical father. So when you look at the children of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, our beloved National Assistant Student Minister Ishmael Muhammad, Brother Rahman, Ahmed, one of the first things that they said was that the mole, right, on his face was on the wrong side. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Aware of that? That it was on the wrong side. So it's like, so basically, it's almost like it wasn't this, he looked younger and it was on it, and the mole was not, it was now, but that's an important statement to say, well, okay, it's physically not located in the same place. You can't surgically make that change. Like, let's just stop and let's take that claim. So first, we're doing sort of a logical tree, right? So a logical tree. So first gate, it's like an algorithm. It's like first gate, yes, no, and then yes, and we keep going down the line of deductive reasoning. So the first gate is, in this little truth algorithm, did the children, not just one, did all the children of the Hon Elijah Muhammad who said that this mole was in the wrong place, did they all hallucinate or lie? That's the first question we need to ask ourselves, because you can't pass the second gate unless you, by logical deduction, you can't pass the other gate of reasoning if you don't pass that first gate. We have to assess, okay, did they lie? Or did they, did they make this up? Did all three make a mistake? So now one child could make a mistake. And by the way, it's not just the children. Other people, to my understanding, have made that same observation about the mole. So I'm mostly, I'm like, in my field, a sub-discipline of mine is statistics. So I think in terms of probability distributions. So if you say you have one witness that says account A that is wrong, that the probability of that is maybe 50-50. 50-50 chance that, they're wrong or right. But a second one, then the probability distribution drops to, now it's no longer 50-50. Now it increases to 75%. And then if you add another one, now each time you add a witness who sees the same thing, you reduce the probability of that claim being false. By definition. Or there was a concerted effort to lie. But now I'm thinking children in their emotional state, of all the things that they would think of doing, lying about on which side of the face the mole is on is by just simple reasoning, just common sense. It's not something you would expect of a child to do, or let alone a group of children who are mourning the thinking that they've lost their father. Like, it would make no sense for them to all concur to say, okay, you know what, we're going to pull a prank on everyone. We're going to tell everybody that the mole is on the wrong side. Not only that, when that was said, if you go back to the witness, to the moment that the testimony of the narration of this claim, it was as a surprise, like, hey, wait a minute, something's wrong. It's not on the right. So it's more like a claim of surprise. It's not like, hey, can I tell you something? By the way, I saw that the mole is on. No, it was more like, hey, wait a minute, something's wrong. The mole. So that's a state of surprise. So, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm trying to take just again, logical reasoning. You're going back into the witness. We're cross-examining, you know. So the state of mind of the child, or the children in this case, is that first, surprise. They're surprised. That's the reaction that they related. They were shocked that it was on the wrong side. And they all agreed that it was on the wrong side. And from what I understand, and in the chat, you can correct me if I'm wrong, others have made that same observation, that it's on the wrong side. So I have several witnesses making this statement as a claim, but a claim of surprise, not a claim of, you know, reporting a statement where, you know, you may want to distort the truth or the facts. No, it's more like, hey, I don't understand. Something's wrong here. It's supposed to be here. It's over there. That's very different. Again, so it speaks to the mind state. Why are we taking time to dissect this? Because you have to establish the mindset of the witness. Again, if this was a court case, you have to establish the mindset of the witness. Is the witness in a position, in a mindset, in a context, or does the witness have any motive to make up a story? Same with the prostitutes. Now we're talking about the children. Would they have a motive? And based on the circumstantial evidence, based on just common sense, we would have to argue that as a brother student minister Ishmael, brother Rahman, and brother Ahmed, they had no, and I think other children as well, they have no reason at this particular time to just look at the corpse and say, the mole is on the wrong side. There's no motive to make this up as a lie. Why is this important? Why am I stressing it so much? It's because now, if we establish that their claim is true, now we have to deal with the consequence of that claim, because you can't just leave it alone. Now you've established that it's true. Oh, now we have a problem, because if it is on the wrong side, now you have to explain it. You know what I'm saying, brother Joshua?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Explain it now. Explain to me, how is it on the wrong side? You need an explanation. So now let's go again. Just 1 second. Somebody at the same time. You see, I'm still there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right here with you.
Am I still on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry about that. So, what were we saying before I got this call? We've established that, okay, so now if it is the truth, now you have to explain how is that, and now we get to the cloning part of this. So if the corpse, according to some witnesses, including his children, looked maybe 20 years younger, those are the reports that we heard, that they looked younger, 20 years younger approximately, if I'm not mistaken. And significant facial differences, mole on the other side. So if the mole was on the other side, well, the question is it a standard operating procedure of funeral parlors to surgically remove a mole and put it on the other side? Is that a standard operating procedure? Because otherwise you have no explanation as to how it got there. It had to have gotten there somehow. So now, what is interesting, see, we talk about cloning. Of course, you know, this world's scientists are now moving into cloning, and you know, the first successful clone was a sheep, was a lamb. Interestingly enough, that the first one was a lamb.
Yes, sir.
And that made the cover of the Final Call back in the day. Um, but now, in chemistry, in physics, right? If we're not privy to the science of the God, Master Father Muhammad. We're not privy to his high science, but we can get at hints using some of what we know from physics and chemistry. But when you look at your hand, right? And it's going to sound a little bit esoteric, but it's going to make sense in a minute. So if I say, like, there's a reason why you can't shake your hand, your right hand cannot shake your left hand. Like you can't do a handshake. It's not possible.
Yes,
I can
sir.
only shake your right hand, and you can only shake my left hand. That is because when you take your palms and you open it, see this? What you call, this is a chiral reflection. This is called chirality,
Mm,
where
mm.
like a split, right? So in nature, this is a very common pattern. It's like when you copy paste something. So it's like the other half of something. So you have a chiral reflection of something. So I was meditating on this when I heard the report about the mole being on the wrong side. I said, that's interesting because that looks like a chiral effect. It's almost
Mm.
as if it was a chiral copy. Because if you were to make a chiral clone of the Hon Elijah Muhammad, that is exactly what you would get. That's the reason why I say if I'm on Zoom and I put out, if I write something, for me, it's going to look backwards, but for you, it's going to look straight.
Yes, sir.
That's
Yes,
chiral,
sir.
right? That's a chiral effect. So what we could postulate, and this is again just looking at deductive reasoning, because we have to draw some explanation as to why this mole was on the other side. But it just so happens that that corresponds with the law of chiral mirrors.
Mm.
It's almost like if you take a copy of something and you would get exactly like a mirror reflection, if you will,
Yes, sir.
um, of a person. And so when you say clone, you might say that not only is it a clone, but it might be a chiral copy of the corpse of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, which would make perfect sense and would explain the diametrical opposite side of the mole, because it's almost like that zoom effect that I was talking about, or that hand, when you copy it, it opens like that. So that would also indicate a level of technology that is of course superior to what this world has. But now when we look at today, in terms of cloning, the advances that are being made, and according to our teachings, Minister Louis Farrakhan says that we've allowed them, and Dr. Wesley Muhammad could talk about it much more than I could, but how we've allowed them to have some baby planes so that they could actually have access to some of the technology. And we've noticed a sort of a jump at a certain, point in time. But if you look at all of these technologies for cloning, again, I'm asking the question to those who don't believe: how difficult would it be if a geneticist of this world who have technology, who, if you believe it, Master Father Muhammad is by far inferior or not as advanced, I prefer to use the term, by far less advanced, then how can you in the same breath be shocked that somehow this technology would be used? Because if you look at the Quran, when it says they say they killed them, but nay, they killed them not. They believe they killed them on the cross. So basically, the image that's being drawn for us in the Quran is that there was a body on a cross hanging, and everybody believed it was Jesus. But now here you have Allah say, no, you think it was Jesus, but it's not. Well, you do see there's a body there, all right. But what
Mm.
is interesting, again, is when we look at some of the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and some of the sayings and the analyses of the scholars, and some of the complementary work that was written around these passages of the Quran to give further context, where it is said that the body was replaced. It was specifically explained that there was a replacement of our body was given the physical appearance of Jesus. Thus, people believe that it was him. So now, if, again, you have two choices when you read that scripture. You have there's two logical choices you have. You can either say, well, that applied to the Jesus, of 2,000 years ago. You can believe that, and my Christian brothers and sisters would argue that, or I mean, my Orthodox Muslim brothers and sisters would argue that. But if you're a believer, you would say, well, but if you say you believe in the Hon Elijah Muhammad, and the Hon Elijah Muhammad said that he is that person that is being referred to, he said that he was. So if he is, then what is the logical implication of that? If indeed the context of that ayat in the Quran is that there will be a body, according to the hadith, according to the various scholars, that there will be a body and it will be swapped, and the body that will be swapped will look exactly like Jesus. The only technology, since we don't believe in a spook or a mystery, we believe in modern equipment and technology and science and physics. The only way you can accomplish that without being spooky, hocus pocus, and having a magic wand, the only way you can really achieve that is through some form of cloning. And we know that that type of cloning is actually very possible in this world. So you can't tell me now that it is not possible for the one we believe to be the master of the wheel, the mother of wheels. It would just make no sense. So again, if you accept the Hon Elijah Muhammad as being the fulfillment of that scripture, you have to take it all. You can't take it in part, because that's the consequence. It means if you believe in part, you say, well, I believe in part of the teaching, I believe in that part, I don't believe in the other part. Fine, okay. That's your prerogative. But if you say, or if you claim, that's the thing. If you claim you believe in all the teachings, then you're forced into this box, this logical, deductive box, where you can't get out of this logic that, well, by necessity, he has to fulfill that scripture. And by necessity, the only way he could fulfill it is through some sort of cloning and through some sort of, and then visibly there was because you could do an exact clone with exactly the same, spots, everything, being the same. But now, why did Master Father Muhammad choose to use a chiral, I would call it in technical terms, a chiral clone of the messenger of the Hon Elijah Muhammad? Why would he use a chiral clone? Well, to leave a sign that his anointed is with him. Would he not leave a sign? I mean, look, just logically speaking, if he is alive, would there not be signs? And if you look at a man and you're seeing that the man physically looks the same, but there's really unless there's been some really heavy surgery, they made this man look younger and he's got the mole on the wrong side of the face. Well, hey, then you have to concur that, look, the only logical explanation is that this was done deliberately and was left as a sign for us to know, yes, what the scripture says is true in the Quran and in the Bible with Elijah. And so the only technology that you could really posit, as a candidate for this swap is cloning, and cloning is well within the range of scientific explanations. Because that's the thing about it too. We have to go back into the mindset of people who have a hard time with this. Is that, they're thinking it's not possible because they can't think of it as being scientifically plausible. And this is why we're deconstructing those points one by one to say, no, it is, you're you would not be correct in saying that believing in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad being physically alive is unscientific. You cannot make that case, is what I'm trying to say. So, but then not only can't you make that case, but now that you make the case that it is scientifically possible to make the that we could explain it scientifically, then when you take that in light of all the scriptures, all the witnesses, then all of this, compounds. And the compounded effect of all of this is inevitably, well, he must be alive. There's no other possible explanation.
Beautiful.
So that's how I would answer that, the cloning part. And I'm sorry, sometimes I seem to be touching several points, but the thing about it is the reason I do that is because, again, you can't look at these variables in isolation. And sometimes if you look at one point in isolation, that's how we end up making mistakes, is that we just try to explain that part alone by itself. But the point about cloning touches so many other points, and we need to tackle them in context.
Beautiful. Praise be to Allah. And people are showing you love. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Minister, for your breakdown of this important, very vital subject matter to us on People's Podcast and to the world. Brother Calvin has a lot of comments and questions, and we're going to come to those questions. And so does Sister Minister Aisha out of Phoenix. We have a quick 60-second commercial break for all of the sponsors of the People's Podcast. We are grateful for every like, share, and subscription. Thank you all for watching, and we grateful for every anonymous Cash App as well. Please continue to show love. Thank you very much. We'll be coming right back to our brother. Part 2. Y'all don't want to, I don't want to miss this. This is some deep stuff. Deep history. Are live with the People's Podcast. Street Premiere Media Production. He has a 4K camera and a drone. He does television and film editing. Please reach out if you need any of that. Sister Naima, Stay On Point Dance Academy. She teaches ballet virtually to young girls all across the country. Sister Miriam, ABC I Love Me children's book and coloring book. My father's book, A Soldier in the Movement of Christ. My 2 books, Cleopatra, which is a children's book, and No Father, No Excuse, both of which are available on Amazon. There we go. Boom. Here we go. 1 second. There we go. All right. Boom. Also, if you all have, thank you to all the sponsors, but if you all have any guest suggestions, please put them in the comments. And please let us know what city you all are watching from. Shout out to Flint, Michigan. They never put a name. They just always say Flint, Michigan. So thank you to Flint, Michigan for always watching. Showing love, Brother Musa, Brother Kente, Sister Auntie, Sister Hope, and of course the gentleman on YouTube. Thank you to all the people who show love all around the world for each comment. Now I'm going to go back, brother, to I'm coming to Brother Calvin's question because that's a very deep question for our brother, the scientist, student minister Roger A. Muhammad. But I wanted to ask you, I just interviewed a brother named Captain Wali Bahar. He was with Brother Imam Wardeen Muhammad. He was the last people to physically see the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad in 1975. And then you have a lot of people who were at 1975 Savior's Day. When they watched, and he told me they watched the People's Podcast, and they are watching you explain this to those who have a difference of opinion like them or different viewpoint. Should we show love to them? Should we embrace them? Should we call them hypocrites? How should we address people who have different views on the messenger in a time like this when they love the messenger, they just don't see it how we see it. So how should we address them?
Yes, no, again, I think we need to address it with love, and especially those who have sacrificed so much before you and I were even born, Brother Joshua. We weren't even thought in our parents' minds. And some of these, believers and ministers and captains and so on work so hard to build the foundation that we're standing on. We could never disrespect them and all the work that they've done because they have a different point of view. The Quran says, argue in the best of manner. And so the best of manner is to have the best of spirits and to always, again, you don't have to get upset when you're right. You get upset when you're wrong. Like you get riled up, you get defensive. Like people become emotional. Like some people might be listening to this and they might be emotional right now. Like they're like, get anxious but if you're standing on truth will stand for itself. You just have to lift the truth. That's all you have to do, just lift it. And so on this point, we should not, we should keep our civility and also, again, from my humble vantage point as a fellow student, believer,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
just believer, anybody else, but from my humble vantage point, I try to approach it in that way, where, I don't, we speak to some brothers and sisters who have completely different, belief systems. So they might be Buddhist, they might be Christian, they might be quote unquote Orthodox Muslim or Shiite or Sufi or, Zoroastrianism. So, and we're able to conversate with them and be civil and have intelligent conversations. Of course, we should be able to do that among people who we all say we believe in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We should be able to do that, so that's the spirit, that I try to come with. And I think that's the spirit that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan would like for us to come with. And again, the best way is to, when you argue this, to ask questions and learn all about yourself. Because again, if what we're saying is logical, again, you just have to point it back at the person. It's okay, well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that he would escape a death plot. Did he not? It's like an algorithm. It's yes or no. And that algorithm leads to the next gate in the algorithm. So it's like, okay, he said it. Okay. So now he said it. The next question is, did it happen? And if so, how? And then did he not say that he would go and get the teachings, the new teachings? Did he not say that also? So that's like, so it's a question. So it's just like, is it possible that the Elijah Muhammad is still physically alive? It's a question. So sub question, did he not also say that he was going back to get the new teachings, that he was going to study and get the new teachings? Yes or no? Did he say that? Yes or no? Yes. We know that's a fact. We know he said it. Okay. No one's going to debate that. So since he said it, now comes the logical extension of that. So the next question is, in this decision tree, so is it possible for a person to go and receive a teaching and a book and to transmit that teaching in that book if they're physically dead? Is it possible? Is it possible? So the answer is no. Like there's no, so it's over. But basically it's, so by logical deduction, I don't have to tell you he's alive. The logical deduction tells you he has to necessarily be alive, because if, when we're talking about reductio ad absurdum in logical fallacies, a reductio ad absurdum is when you make a statement, and if that statement is true, it invalidates all the other statements. So if a person cannot receive a teaching if he's dead, and if a person, can you escape a death plot if you're dead? Can you escape a physical death plot if you're physically dead? No. Okay, so that's 2 points then. So you can't escape a physical death if you're physically dead. That's almost like an oxymoron, like it's a circular logic, like it's a self-evidence. Like you don't have to prove that. It's self-evident. You can't escape death if you're dead. And you can't receive a teaching if you're dead, because you're dead. So, by extension, if you're dead, that means that when you said that you would receive a new book, a new teaching, and that you would escape death, it means that you lied. That's the only thing it could mean. There is no other logical explanation. You're trapped in this logic. It's a loop. You know, it's a loop. It's a circuit. So from the time you present just the questions answer themselves because it's self-evident. So that is why we said the last time that when you say that Hon Elijah Muhammad is physically dead, you're actually negating all of his teachings. That's what we meant by that. Is that because when you say that, necessarily it means that it's not true. You're not getting no new teaching. It's not true. He's not escaping death. It's not true that he's coming back, and if he didn't tell us that he was not God, we would be found, because you can't do that if you're dead. So that's not true. So we've already identified, if by going by that logic that he's physically dead, we've already identified 3 things that he said that must be false if he's dead. They must be false. It's not like maybe you could dance around it, find some sort of, esoteric curve to try. No, there is no curve. There is no, it's a clear-cut yes, no logical gate. They call this Boolean logic. So it's like you're trapped. So again, I don't have to argue. I just have to ask the question. Like, you answering that question, those questions that are, if you will, follow-up questions to, is it possible that Hon Elijah Muhammad is still physically alive? By you answering those questions, you've already answered yourself that he's alive. If he's not alive, then he's wrong. And if he's wrong, well, I could just take this bow tie off and we can just all go back to the club, you know? But I'm being, using a little levity, but it's real. It's real, Brother Joshua. It's just, but oftentimes, again, because we're not necessarily, and this is not no fault of our own, but I encourage us to study critical analysis, study probability, study basic statistics, study, logic, Boolean logic. You don't have to be a scientist or to have a master's degree or a PhD in, mathematics to learn these things. But you have to, there are books out there in terms of just logical fallacies where you check your own thinking. Like, because sometimes that's the thing, again, that we don't do. Like, I'm making a claim. Does it make sense? And we don't challenge our own claims. Like, we feel comfortable in what we call our truth, but there's no such thing as our truth. There's no my truth, your truth. There's a truth. Like, the sun is 93 million miles from the earth. That's not my truth. That's not your truth. If you say it's 93 miles from the earth, you say, well, that's my truth. No, it's not. It's false. You've accepted falsehood. That's the only truth that is yours. The truth that you've accepted falsehood, because it is not verifiable. What you said is inaccurate. So, but sometimes we do this with more, if you will, abstract concepts in our thinking. Like, theology is more abstract. Like, certain more subtle questions, such as the question of, is he physically alive? But I would encourage those believers who don't believe it, go through the chain of logic. You don't even have to study that much. Answer those 3 questions that I just posed. Just answer them and try to come back to us with an answer where, if Hon Elijah Muhammad is physically dead, it still makes sense. Come, and I'll wait. I'll wait. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, My handle is roger.am. If you want to DM me, I'm here for it. I'm waiting. But you can't, you know. So that's the thing. So that's what I would say to believers when we interact with other believers who are struggling with that point. Just ask questions and learn all about yourself, and just go through the logical, deductive reasoning steps. And mathematically, as Islam is mathematics, you will inevitably come to that conclusion. Period. Full stop.
Beautiful. All praise due to Allah. You teaching, and thank you for everyone showing love all around the world. Thank you, brother Marvin, who's saying actual facts. All praise be to Allah. And now to brother Calvin. Thank you, sister Aisha, to sister Naima. Everyone who's saying all praise be to Allah. Beautiful, wonderful. Brother Calvin, who is from I don't think he put Richmond, Virginia, says also why were armed guards around the tomb?
Thank you, brother. Thank you. That's another one. See, and I think we slightly touched on it, but not much. That's another thing. It's very unusual to have armed guards around a body. I mean, what were there rumors that someone was going to try to creep in and just steal the body to make pretend that he's still alive? Was it like you don't do that unless you have probable cause that something is going to happen. And what is interesting about that is that it again kisses and embraces the scriptures around Jesus and the tomb and the guards that were guarding the tomb. And when they found that it had been moved, so it's like it connects and embraces again. This is the fulfillment of scripture on every level. You can find such a great Pythagorean match for every angle.
Yes,
It's
sir.
congruent. There is full congruence on every angle of the triangle. It fits perfectly. But that is another circumstantial evidence where if you were to just isolate it, maybe it won't necessarily be the strongest argument, but when you compound it with other variables, all of a sudden it all falls together. It all falls in place, and the puzzle starts to make perfect sense. But if I could say, brother, also my wife lifted a scripture for me after the meeting, and just came to me, um, in the New Testament about the disciple Thomas. And when we answer the question, like, for people who are not necessarily, who don't necessarily believe that the Hon Elijah Muhammad is still physically alive, given that the disciples of Jesus are archetypes, of that, basically they're antitypes, as Minister Jabril calls them. That is a type of a follower. That is Thomas, where Thomas said, "Hey man, I don't believe that stuff, man. You got to take me to the man himself. I got to put my hands in the holes." And Jesus had to come forward and say, "Look, here, go ahead. You can see you can pierce it." And he had to do it. And after he did it, then he believed. But at no point did anybody say Thomas is a hypocrite. Thomas is a Judas. Thomas is a wrongdoer. No, at no point was he ever excommunicated from the circle of the disciples at any point in the New Testament. At any point. Thomas is never excommunicated. In fact, he is granted his request to get to touch put his fingers through the holes. So, we have to be patient. He will come back, and this truth will manifest. And we just have to be, for some of us, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take the actual, I see. And again, I think that with the increasing presence of the manifestation of the baby planes and the mother wheel, and the research conducted by brother student minister Dr. Wesley Muhammad in his book, and brother Rashad's documentary. When we no, I'm not brother Ilya Rashad.
Yes, sir.
I think that the evidence, especially demonstrating that the grays and the long-headed green aliens is not supported by the evidence when we look up close. Dr. Wesley has done a tremendous job of documenting that evidence. It's becoming increasingly difficult, to again make the case for him being physically dead. It is becoming increasingly difficult. And again, I come from a position of, and I would love, to have a constructive dialogue with any believer, on this topic, who wants to have like an actual dialogue and conversation. I would love to do that. Again, I think in terms of equations, algorithms, statistics, probability distributions and whatnot. I'm wired like that. That's why I speak the way, in terms of equations and variables and logical, because I'm just wired that way. And I only say this to say that of anybody out there, I would be inclined to reject that the Hon Elijah Muhammad is still physically alive because of the kind of training that I have. If there was a case to be made against it, in terms of using mathematical reasoning, because what I try to do, I think what we should all do is we should challenge ourselves. And that is actually something that I've done. I've challenged myself to say, well, prove it, which is why, the conversation that we're having, every believer should be able to be as comfortable having this, but you have to challenge yourself and come up with every possible argument as to why he would be dead. And see, does it hold up or not? And again, I think we have a case to say that it does not hold up to say that he's dead.
All praise to beautiful representation. Thank you all for watching. And Brother Adio Nasur says, excellent point, analogy about Doubting Thomas. Yes, sir. And I think that you do a great job. That's why I wanted you back for part 2 of representing the spirit of the Most Honorable Mr. Farrakhan and how you address people who don't agree. Because some of the interviews I've done, I just saw some of the comments, and my whole life I've been blessed to know the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and that's just not his spirit that I've seen towards people who don't believe that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is physically alive. So people be like, "How you interview him?" And I be like, "Bro, what y'all mean?" Like I know the minister for myself. Like I've seen him, I know him. You know what I'm saying? Y'all all riled up, and that ain't how he responding to people who don't believe he's talking to them. Really? Well, that's what you. But I look in the comments on YouTube, and I'm like, what? Who y'all representing? So I stay out of that. Speaking of the minister, the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, I wanted to ask you, with him, it's time for, this is going to be like the question, inshallah, that will be going on for a long time on the People's Podcast. With his departure coming up, do you believe that we'll see a body? Do you think like what's going to happen? Do you think how important is it for us to know that we going to have to be tested the same way the messengers followers were tested? And
Yes.
yeah, what do you think?
That's a big question, brother Joshua. That's a really big question. And I think we have to be careful in when you're trying to, one trap that we can sometimes fall into is to and I see us sometimes doing that, and I've done that quite a bit in the past, and I try to stay away from it now, is we can try to overanalyze things and make up, like we put ourselves in the position of the 24 scientists in the way we map out the way things are going to go down. Like we map it out. So here's what's going to happen. and then we come up with these theories, and they really are just theories, because then it's just your own explanation, your own interpretation of what you think might go down based on X, Y, Z. That being said, if we draw lessons from the departure of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad,
yes, sir.
it did not go down the way anybody had expected, which is why so many people had a hard time accepting that he is still physically alive, because it didn't go down the way the believers had it in they pictured in a certain way. You know what I mean? Like, because because you know, in 72, when the messenger said that, you know, he wanted all the ministers to teach on the fact that he would be gone for 3 years and he would be going
Yes, sir.
to
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I would assume that a lot of people in their minds, they had a picture of how that was going to go down. You know, and in the mindset of, let's say, 1972, 1973, looking at the world from those lenses, if you would have told many of those believers that in 2024, we would be sitting here having this conversation, and that this world would still be up the way it is, and that the devil wouldn't be completely eradicated, and we wouldn't be in the hereafter, and, you know, and enjoying it, they would say, you're crazy, brother. You're a hypocrite. Some of them, you're a hypocrite, brother.
Yeah.
So what am I trying to say? What am I trying to say, Brother Joshua, is we've got to be really, really careful in not setting up expectations for ourselves that will be thwarted by the master plan of the master planner, who can see so far beyond our limited scope of view. That's why we call him the master of circumstances. Now, I get to work with some algorithms where, if you look at, for example, artificial neural networks, how you train a neural network is that you feed it all kinds of variables that are difficult for your mind and my mind, your brain, to immediately compute. So you feed it into this artificial neural network, and then it starts to find patterns across the various variables that you feed it, and then it can predict an answer from whence you know not, you know, but the answer will be accurate. And that's how you get YouTube algorithms that can give you the right video at the right time with the right ad, and because they can predict, right? So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because, you know, the underlying premise of how these complex things work is complexity theory. And, you know, the universe that we live in is like, sometimes we don't appreciate the number of variables that are at play for any given situation. So when it comes to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan departing, the number of variables that are moving around at the same time, you would need a giant computer that we don't have access to in order to compute the outcome in the way that Master Father Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad foresee it and will it to be. And so back in 75, maybe we had set up expectations for ourselves, a picture of this is how it's going to go down. And when people saw that it didn't go down that way, what happened? Why is it so hard for people to believe that? Because I saw a body. I mourned at the casket of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. They were genuinely hurt, man. You put your whole life into this, and now you see the man that you expected to go up in the wheelie. You would see him go up in a way that, you know, you thought you was going to see the baby plane take him up, and you thought you was going to see this go down, and it didn't. And then you learn that he dies of a congestive heart failure in a hospital, and that in his last moments he was frail and weak. That will traumatize you if you set yourself up for certain expectations. So my best advice would be, humbly, that we should not set up those expectations. That we should take the position of a student and say, I believe as Allah will reveal it. And oh Allah, help me to recognize it when I see it. but don't get a preconceived idea about how it's going to happen, because that's going to be the test. Because you and I, we may think, well, yeah, we already have the blueprint. We know what's going to happen. It's going to be a funeral. Maybe it's going to go down differently. We don't. I don't know, Brother Joshua. Do you know? We don't know. So
Yes, sir.
the position of like, it's okay not to know, and it's okay to have faith. But why is it that in the study guide that we're studying on building the will, when you
That's
look at
right.
the components of the will, of what makes up the will, there's faith, there's desire, and there's knowledge. Faith and knowledge are complementary components of the will. Why? Because knowledge is your ability to assess the actual facts that are before you that you can access, that allow you to draw a conclusion about a particular phenomenon.
Yes,
But
sir.
then beyond the point of that phenomenon, beyond the point of the variables that you can access about the phenomenon, if I tell you something else is going to happen, then you have this knowledge where you've been able to validate on so many points that this is true, that you can say confidently, yes, I believe, so I have faith. I'll give you a very simplistic example of that. Just the sun rising tomorrow morning, we take it for granted. But guess what? There is an element of faith in you believing that the sun will get up in the morning tomorrow. There's an element of faith. It may be a very small one, but the reality is that in strict mathematical and physical terms, something that has not happened is still part of a probability distribution. It is not a fact yet. So you have to have faith that it will happen. What do you base that faith on? Well, I base my faith on the fact that I know that the earth has a diameter of 25,000, so you know what I mean? So I know that basically based on historical data, based on physical data, mathematical assessments of the trajectory of the planet, I can predict and I can have faith and a very high confidence that the sun will get up tomorrow morning. Well, it might sound simplistic, but it applies to literally everything. So our faith in the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is predicated upon everything we know about him and that he's done that established the position of who he is. And because he's established that position with all the things that we do know, it gives us a premise to have faith in what we don't know. And that's how our faith is vindicated. And so we don't know how it's going to happen, but we know enough by the works, by the teachings, by every aspect of the teaching that we've been able to validate. We have the knowledge that this man is who he says he is. And so what he says will happen must happen, because otherwise it would invalidate his identity, which we cannot do because it has already been demonstrated.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
In that, my answer would simply be faith. Have faith. Build your knowledge in the teachings. Build your knowledge. Build the actual facts in your mind. Strengthen your conviction in that which you can learn, that which you can know, that it will solidify your faith in what you don't know and what you don't see, so that your faith in the unseen event will be solidified and you won't set yourself up for expectations that will not be met. And that disappointment is what leads Iblis to become Shaitan. Because literally the name Iblis, the etymological root of it, is he who was caused to be disappointed. So it is a fiery spirit who is disappointed, and then that disappointment causes you now to fall down a path where you challenge your faith and you abandon it and you go down the Shaitanic path. So I would advise us, don't try to set up scenarios in your mind. And I've heard Brother Minister Ishmael say that too. Don't try to set that up. Just have faith But solidify your faith with knowledge, and how you do that is you study what the body of material that is before us, which we can readily support with physics, mathematics, science, chemistry, and every field of endeavor can bear witness to everything that we've been taught. And therefore, if that all can bear witness to it, how can the next part of it be untrue? It cannot. Because it may
Beautiful.
come whence we know not, and in a way that we don't know and that we didn't expect, and that might be the trial. That might be the trial. But we will still have to stand and say, I believe that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is still physically alive, because he said it. And here's why I believe he is who he says he is. That I can bring the mathematics and the explanations and the fancy equations on, and the facts and whatnot. But for up to the limit of what I cannot see beyond, then I apply faith that is undergirded by this assurance. But no, I would humbly caution us against over theorizing this particular point, in my humble perspective.
Beautiful, yes, sir. And that's a great response. And Brother Adi on the source says, deep teaching, seatbelts on. Exactly. And can't wait to put this to YouTube. We have 2 more questions for our guests. Thank you very much, sir, for breaking this down. And the people on YouTube want to show nothing but love as well. I wanted to ask you, on a lighter note, what type of movies do you enjoy to watch, sir?
Oh man, I'm a big, gigantic nerd for everything Marvel, Star Wars.
Okay.
No, I'm no. It's almost it's a problem, you know. Like when I'm not wearing a suit, brother. Like I look like Sheldon Cooper, man. I got my Superman.
Okay.
No, some people like like Brother Nuri. He got more like that urban kind of vibe, and me, I look like a straight nerd, brother. I kind of a hip nerd, but I straight. I really I enjoy those movies, brother. And I'm guilty as charged, brother.
Yes, sir. So are you more Marvel or DC?
Well, I love both, but I'm more into Marvel just because I don't know, I'm more familiar with the universe, and they, to be quite honest, I mean, they put out, in my opinion, like more movies. Well, don't get me started. But up until phase 4,
Exactly. Exactly. I'm still phase 4.
up to phase 4, I would argue that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is way tighter. Even though I enjoy a lot of the classic Batman, movies, and Man of Steel to me is remains one of the greatest. Like in the Snyderverse, like that's one of the
Absolutely.
best, if not the best, Superman movie of all time, in my humble assessment. But I love both. But I do have a leaning toward Marvel comics, and as a young boy, I used to just read a lot of comic books, and I've always been a kind of a closet nerd, and yes, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Great. All right. And my next question is, sir, you said your social media, but where can people, because I know people want to have comments and they're going to be able to reach out to you just to build and unpack other things on social media. How can people reach out to you, sir?
Oh, yes, sir. Well, I mean, if you go on Instagram, you just look up Roger A. Muhammad. On Instagram, my handle is roger.a.m. So, and Facebook, same thing. You could DM me, from Facebook, Instagram. We always on there trying to showcase a little bit of work we're trying to do up here in Montreal to help the album Miss Louis Farrakhan with the Fruit of Islam and the MGT, and and shout out to the other cities, Ottawa and Toronto, my
Right.
brother Tyrone, my brother Stafford, student coordinators up there doing amazing work. And yes, sir. But yeah, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and always open to chat, always open to discuss. And cheap plug. I mean, you could also find uh I have a I have a couple of books, but there's one on Amazon if you want. It's called Who is the Original Man? A Molecular Anthropology of Pre-Adamic Civilization. It's kind of a fancy term, but in truth, really what it is just it's a scientific investigation on establishing the existence of the ancient civilizations that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad talked about with
Mm.
respect to, you know, before ancient Egypt, because I love my brothers and sisters, in the Kemet, studies, and I love them, and I always tell them though, ancient Egypt is not the root of Black civilization. It is the end of ancient Black civilization.
Mm.
Uh, it's like the pyramids are the end of our civilization because we buried them, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught. And then there are so many different um, there's so much scientific evidence for that, from anthropology, archaeology, and genetics, and so on. So that book essentially investigates all of these aspects, which again, a lot of modern scholars are bearing witness to, but the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has been teaching us that from the 1930s. So and we challenge some of the authors out there who claim that the pyramids were built by aliens, and so we tackle all of that. So yeah, there's a digital version if you want. So that was my cheap plug, brother Joshua.
Yes, sir. I want to
Inshallah.
stay right there, man. I want to stay right there. So you're saying that the pyramids weren't built by aliens?
Oh, I'm definitely saying that. I'm definitely saying that. So, but the thing is, not only that though, is that pyramids are a sign, a vestige. The Elijah Muhammad said that if you want to sign, and by the way, Dr. Ridgely Muhammad wrote the preface for the book, and I thank him so much for that, our Minister of Agriculture and the research team. But I mean, I learned that the Elijah Muhammad said that if you want a sign of when the Black man and woman was God on the planet, go to Egypt. And if you take that seriously, if you take his words seriously and you start investigating, you start to realize why he said that. So we go into some of the advanced science that went into building the pyramids, that of which we know because Elijah Muhammad said that the true technology behind it will not be revealed until the devil is removed. But it is built based on a hydraulic system. And Dr. Ridgely Muhammad was one of the first ones to actually bring up evidence that was repeated by other scholars later about that. But we go into some of the science in that shows that it was way more advanced than what we may popularly think it was.
Mm.
And not only that, they're much older than what we thought or what people generally think they are. So they're not necessarily the resting places of pharaohs, Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaura. They're actually much more than that. And Mother Tainetta Muhammad breaks down some of those things, but we try to go into the pure science of it, and unpacking some of those elements and showing how this is really just a vestige of much older, much more advanced civilizations. And the contradiction in that, and I'm not going to get too much in that, brother. You're going to get me started. But briefly, what is interesting, and we show it in the book in very much in detail, is that ancient Egypt poses a major contradiction for the conventional theory of evolution, where typically a civilization, when you look at the first cars that were built in the 20s, and you look at the Tesla today, what you see is a straight line of evolution. It goes from better to better, and it keeps optimizing. What is really, really puzzling, and that Egyptologists just choose to ignore it, but it's a blatant fact, is that the pyramids are supposedly at the early stage, the seminal stages of ancient Egyptian civilization, but it's the most advanced stage. So it's almost to say their most advanced accomplishments comes out of nowhere right from the beginning. And then after that, you look at Egypt's technology and it keeps going down. And we even have a curve to show it keeps going down, down, down. And later, like millennia later in the 12th dynasty, one of the pharaohs who tried to reestablish the greatness of the ancient ones tried to rebuild the pyramid. And man, the thing cracked, it fell apart. I showed pictures side by side. So look, so, you know, it makes no sense that it's almost like if you were to say that the founding fathers of America, you know, had come up with, you know, Tesla cars and, you know, iPhones, and now today we'd be like just going on rotary phones, and like it's almost like you're saying that. But you know, I'm kind of simplifying it a little bit, but in the book we go into more details into like how it's actually a devolution and not an evolution, and it points to the fact that our ancestors left this as a sign, but this was the last piece that we left before we buried our civilizations. And all the evidence points to the Sphinx and the pyramids and all of this being lined up around 15,000 years ago. And what happened 15,000 years ago? That's the time the Hon Elijah Muhammad says we buried our civilizations. So we prove that that is exactly what happened, that this disappearance of this ancient high civilization, all scholars who have studied this agree, comes around the time of 15,000 years ago, exactly as the Hon Elijah Muhammad said.
All right. Well, we going deep. So that's what
For another time.
So, that's what I was gonna say. So we gotta put you on the spot. So that means we get a part 3. Is that what we're saying? We get a part 3?
Brother, anytime, brother. It's a pleasure. It's an honor, brother, to serve and to just have this conversation on this amazing platform that you've created, brother. It's an honor. It's an honor. It's an honor. So with pleasure, brother. Pleasure. Yes, and in the meantime, yeah, if anybody has questions and whatnot, and the answers that we don't have, you know, we're good soldiers, so we take it up the chain. I take it up to Brother Arthur, and you can take it up to Brother Ishmael. You can take it up to Brother Louis Farrakhan, and we'll find the answer. But as humble students, we here to build.
Praise be to Allah. Who is the original man? Make sure we go out and get that on Amazon. And now that I know that you're into MCU and DC stuff, I look forward to seeing you in person because I got some stuff to go over with you. So you can
let's go. Let's go. Let's go, bro. I think your dad. I think I saw, like, I noticed that in the living room he has an Iron Man.
You saw that?
Of course I saw that. Because that's my justification when I put on my little. Well, students, I got one. I get one too.
Yes, sir. That was an award, and that he really takes serious. Yes, sir. They got the Iron Man award. That's funny. You're the first person I ever who pointed out that you noticed that. People showing you love all over the world. Thank you very much to Katina tapping in, to the Deborah, and of course it's the Naima, Brother Adi on the source, it's Aisha, and everyone. Brother Calvin, thank you for your great comments and questions. Can't wait to upload this to YouTube. Thank you to the scientists. I want to keep stressing that to the people who are just new to the nation. The People's Podcast reach is vast by the grace of Allah, and I want them to know these are the people who, some of the students in the classroom of the guides, with, you know, under the leadership and guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, that we have a legit scientist with us. So thank you, Student Minister Elijah Muhammad, for taking time out of your busy schedule. Thank you for your sacrifice to help establish Islam in Canada and all around the world. Shout out to your family. You know, always salute them. Can't forget your family. Thank you for their sacrifice as well. And I look forward to meeting you in person, sir.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you again, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes, this is Joshua Leonard Muhammad signing off for the People's Podcast. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you all for watching.